We're still reading about reason. We had started with the 3 powers of the mind, the physical mind, then the vital mind, the rider of the red wild ass, and now we've come to reason. This is our second session, reading about reason, and this continues. We will have, I think, 2 more sessions before we reach the end of this topic. So I'm starting to read on line 501 on page 252. An inconclusive play is reason's toil. Each strong idea can use her as its tool. Accepting every brief, she pleads her case. Open to every thought, she cannot know. The eternal advocate, seated as judge, armors in logic's invulnerable mail 1,000 combatants for truth's veiled throne, and sets on a high horseback of argument to tilt forever with a wordy lance in a mock tournament where none can win. Assaying thought's values with her rigid tests, balanced she sits on wide and empty air, aloof and pure in her impartial poise. Absolute her judgments seem, but none is sure. Time cancels all her verdicts in appeal. Although like sunbeams to our glowworm mind, her knowledge feigns to fall from a clear heaven. Its rays are a lantern's lustres in the night. She throws a glittering robe on ignorance. But now is lost her ancient sovereign claim to rule mind's high realm in her absolute right. Bind thought with logic's forged infallible chain, or see truth nude in a bright abstract haze. A master and slave of stark phenomenon, she travels on the roads of erring sight, or looks upon a set mechanical world constructed for her by her instruments. A bullock yoked in the cart of proven fact, she drags huge knowledge bales through matter's dust to reach utility's immense bazaar. Apprentice she has grown to her old drudge. An aided sense is her seeking's arbiter. This now she uses as the assayer's stone. As if she knew not, facts are husks of truth. The husks she keeps, the kernel throws aside. An ancient wisdom fades into the past. The age's faith becomes an idle tale. God passes out of the awakened thought. An old discarded dream needed no more. Only she seeks mechanic nature's keys. Interpreting stone laws inevitable, she digs into matter's hard, concealing soil to unearth the processes of all things done. A loaded, huge, self-worked machine appears to her eyes' eager and admiring stare, an intricate and meaningless enginery of ordered, fateful, and unfailing chance. Ingenious and meticulous and minute, its brute, unconscious, accurate device unrolls an unerring march, maps a sure road. It plans without thinking, acts without a will. A million purposes serves with purpose none, and builds a rational world without a mind. It has no mover, no maker, no idea. Its vast self-action toils without a cause. A lifeless energy, irresistibly driven, death's head on the body of necessity engenders life and fathers consciousness, then wonders why all was and whence it came. Our thoughts are parts of the immense machine, our ponderings but a freak of matter's law. The mystic's lore was a fancy or a blind. Of soul or spirit we have now no need. Matter is the admirable reality, the patent, unescapable miracle, the hard truth of things, simple, eternal soul. A suicidal, rash expenditure, creating the world by a mystery of self-loss, has poured its scattered works on empty space. Late shall the self-disintegrating force contract the immense expansion it has made. Then ends this mighty and unmeaning toil. The void is left bare, vacant as before. So Sri Aurobindo speaks of the weaknesses of our modern use of reason. He says it's an inconclusive play, is reason's toil. We can make great efforts at logical thinking and exploration, but each strong idea can use reason as its tool, can make any argument. He says she accepts every brief and pleads her case. This is an idea from courts, from legality. Lawyers are asked to represent somebody in the court. So if they agree, if they think there's a chance that they may win the case, they accept the briefing that the defendant gives to them. And then it's the job of the lawyer to do his best to win that case, whatever means he has to use. So reason is like that. She's ready to accept every brief and argue every case. Sri Aurobindo says because this power of reason used like this is open to every thought, she cannot know. She can't have real knowledge. Reason then becomes, he says, the eternal advocate, the one who's pleading all those cases. But that advocate is seated as the judge, to judge the truth of each argument. Using reason, he armors his case, he defends it with logic's invulnerable mail. The word mail here means armor, the kind of armor, chain mail or plate mail that the old warriors used to use. So he says, this advocate uses the armor of logic. He's ready to do that, to provide that invulnerable mail for anybody who asks him. 1,000 combatants for truth's veiled throne. And like the armorers in the old Middle Ages, he sets on a high horseback of argument his combatants. The images of those knights we have seen in films, jousting, they have their long lance and they are positioned in a lists where they can drive at each other with their long lance, and each one is trying to unseat his opponent, to push him off the horse that he's riding. So that's what he does with these arguments, what reason does. He sets on a high horseback of argument. He can mail whichever one of his riders he wants, to tilt forever with a wordy lance. They don't use actual weapons, but words. Lawyers argue with each other using what seems to be reason and logic. But the poet says this is a mock tournament. It's not a real serious one, and none can win it. Reason is assaying thoughts, values, with her rigid tests. Assaying means to test the value of something, usually of metal, precious metals. So there are people who are specially trained as assayers to find out the values of certain things. And I think in the old days they used to have a special stone with which they could, I believed they could test the quality of gold or silver. So reason sits balanced on wide and empty air. There's nothing to support her. She's just floating, sitting as if justice, with her scales, sitting on the wide and empty air, aloof and pure in her impartial poise. She's not supposed to prefer one argument or another. She's impartial. So the judgments of the reason seem to be absolute. Nobody can refute them. But none is sure. She can make them appear so powerful, but in fact they are not reliable. Time cancels all her verdicts in appeal. The verdict is what the judge decides on the basis of the argument. But it very often happens that those verdicts can be challenged, appealed against. And here it says, with the arguments and the weapons of reason, all her verdicts, all those verdicts can be cancelled out if somebody appeals against them and comes up with better arguments. Although like sunbeams, bright sunbeams, falling on our glowworm mind. Glowworms are those little worms, animals that glow in the dark. So if you have only a glowworm mind, perhaps those illuminations of reason may shine like sunbeams. At least that's what she pretends. Her knowledge feigns to fall like sunbeams from a clear heaven. In fact, its rays are nothing more than the light of a lantern in the night, a faint and unreliable light. But she uses it to cover ignorance with a glittering robe, a shining, impressive robe. But then the poet says, but now is lost her ancient sovereign claim to rule mind's high realm in her absolute right. Bind thought with logic's forged infallible chain, or see truth nude in a bright abstract haze. This power of reason and of logical exploration and discovery used to be respected as the highest power of the human mind. But he says now it's no longer like that, this claim of hers. Instead, in our day and age, the power of reason is a master and a slave of stark phenomenon, of facts. She travels on the roads of erring sight, fallible sight, or she looks upon a set mechanical world constructed for her by her instruments. I think he's talking about the way the reliance on science has changed the old ideal reliance on the power of pure reason. So, science shows us a world that's constructed for us by the power of the scientist's instruments. And it is being used, the power of reason is being used like a bullock who's dragging a cart, a bullock yoked in the cart of proven fact, all this mass of facts which are relayed to us by scientific discovery. She's dragging these huge bales, bundles of knowledge in a cart through the dust of matter, heading for the immense bazaar, the marketplace of utility. Traditionally, the power of reason was supposed to be free of any concern about utility. It was to be focused on the search for truth. But in our modern days, there's been a change, which the poet seems to be referring to here. So reason is now an apprentice, a person who is learning. She's become an apprentice to her old drudge. The drudge is who? It's the power of the senses. Now, an aided sense is the arbiter, the one who decides what she shall seek and how she shall seek it. This aided sense provided by science using the powers of our physical senses and adding to them not only the power of reason, but the power of all kinds of tools. This aided sense is what reason is now using to assess the value of things. The assayer's stone is that stone which finds out whether the gold is pure or not. This now she uses as the assayer's stone. It's a change in focus from the search for truth to the search for what is useful. And the poet says it's as if the reason didn't know. She should know, of course she knows, that facts are only husks, the outside, hard outside of truth. She keeps those husks, those hard outsides, and throws away the kernel, the good nut, the good food that is inside. So in this way, an ancient wisdom is fading into the past. Those old ways of thinking and discovering deep truths are being lost. The age's faith, the faith in reason, and the faith in the search for truth becomes an idle tale, a tale which is just told for amusement. So in this way, that very important figure of the past, that search of all high reason, God, has passed out of our awakened thought, the thought of our times. It's been rejected, an old, discarded dream which is no longer needed. Now what reason is looking for is the keys to nature, the mechanic keys to nature, to the machine-like aspect of nature. She wants to interpret, find the meaning of inevitable stone laws, the laws of matter. So she digs into matter's hard, concealing soil, hoping in that way, by probing into matter, to unearth the processes of all things done, everything that happens in the universe. And as a result of her investigation, what appears is another huge machine, a loaded, huge machine appears, which works itself. It's automatic, it works by itself. That's what she discovers with her eager and admiring stare. She's dazzled and carried away by this wonderful discovery of an intricate and meaningless enginery which is based on chance, an enginery, a mechanical process of ordered, fateful, it has effects and consequences, unfailing chance, which doesn't depend on reason. It is ingenious, clever, meticulous, detailed, minute. It's brute, unconscious, accurate device, unrolls an unerring march in which there can be no mistakes, maps a sure road. It plans without thinking, acts without a will, serves a million purposes, although it's relying on chance. It doesn't have any particular purpose. In this way, it builds a rational world, a world that seems rational, although there is no mind behind that rationality at all. That machine has no mover, no maker, no idea. Its vast self-action toils without a cause. I think this is the way that scientific reason is seeing our universe as working. You know? It's driven by energy, but it's a lifeless energy. Death's head, a skull on the body of necessity, of what has to be, what is inevitable, gives rise, engenders life, and fathers consciousness. This is what they say has happened in the universe, no? And now we look around and we wonder why all that has happened and where it has come from. And our own thoughts are seen as parts of this immense machine. our ponderings, all the things we wonder about, want to have solutions to, all our deep questions, they just come to us as a freak, as some abnormal working of matter. All that wonderful, deep, secret knowledge of the mystic's law, the learning of the mystics, is dismissed as a fancy, something imagined, or as something deliberately put there to confuse us. In this way, in this mind, in this consciousness of soul or spirit, we have now no need. Matter is the admirable reality. Matter is the patent, unescapable miracle. Matter is the hard truth of things, simple, eternal, soul alone. We don't need anything else to explain the world to us. I think the next lines refer to a way of looking at the Big Bang theory. A suicidal, rash expenditure, creating the world by a mystery of self-loss, has poured its scattered works on empty space. Late shall the self-disintegrating force, entropy, contract the immense expansion it has made. Then ends this mighty and unmeaning toil. The void is left bare, vacant as before. The empty universe.
Shraddhavan 525. She travels on the road of earning sight, and those 3 lines.
Because she's become a master and slave of stark phenomenon, of material facts. Reason, the power of reason, she's made that her guide, and so she's looking, what she sees is this set mechanical world which works by itself like a machine. But that world is not the real world or the true world. This world has been constructed for her by the instruments which she uses to explore, which the instruments which science uses to explore. This aided sense, that is what science uses. The old thinkers believed that by the power of thought, they could free themselves from the influence of the senses, of what we just, the external things that we see and touch and taste, and arrive at deeper truths. But our modern thought has somehow abandoned that belief, and we've gone back to believing in the predominance of matter, and that is the āsaya for all values. Somebody has asked about line 556 to 559. A lifeless energy, irresistibly driven, death's head on the body of necessity, engenders life and fathers consciousness, then wonders why all was and whence it came. If we think in the way that science has been thinking for the last few centuries, that our universe is based on lifeless energy, which is somehow driven by material forces only. So it's lifeless, it's dead actually. And it's following something we can call necessity, things that happen because they could not be otherwise. The idea is that lifeless energy, following some course of necessity, has given rise to life, engender. That means that's what the Father does. He gives life to new life, to engender. That has engendered life and has eventually given rise not only to living things, but also to conscious beings. And those conscious beings are us. And here we are with our consciousness. We are wondering how all this has come about, where it has come from. Our thoughts are part of the immense machine. I'm very happy to note that in recent years, many serious scientists are noticing. First of all, I think they noticed that the fact that there is life in the universe means that from the very beginning, whatever that beginning was, if it was a Big Bang, from the time of the Big Bang, the potential for life, for living beings, must have been there. It can't have just come out of anything, nothing. It must have been there at the beginning. And from that, it's a very small step to take, to say, oh, well, if life, the possibility, the potentialities of life were there, then the potentiality for consciousness must have been there right from the very beginning. And that is leading many serious scientists to seriously think that the whole universe is in fact conscious and is operating consciously. But at the time when Sri Aurobindo was writing these lines about reason, materialist science was thinking much more, looking at the mechanisms of matter, subatomic particles and all that. Line 551 to 553. So this is about the action of reason. Reason taking matter as its basis. it sees this intricate and meaningless enginery of ordered, fateful, and unfailing chance. So if we see the universe as happening randomly like that, by chance, well, then we can say that it plans without thinking, and that it's acting and doing everything that it does without a conscious will. That is not the real functioning of reason, but it's a way of perhaps thinking about how the universe has come about. I think this idea of the automatic unfolding of the universe without thought, only on the basis of chance, is losing ground. It will have to be revised. This is talking about the conclusions of reason in our day, in our time. And if I'm to answer this question, I want to start a couple of lines higher up, where it says that the conclusion of reason is that of soul or spirit, we have now no need. Matter is the admirable reality, the patent, unescapable miracle, the hard truth of things, simple, eternal, soul. A suicidal, rash expenditure, creating the world by a mystery of self-loss, has poured its scattered works on empty space. Late shall the self-disintegrating force contract the immense expansion it has made. Then ends this mighty and unmeaning toil. The void is left bare, vacant as before. So several people have asked me to explain this passage. I mentioned, I think, in that previous class that in my view it refers to the fairly current scientific belief about the origin of our universe. I'm not an expert in this field at all, but I will try to explain it as best I can. I think sometime in the 1930s, two scientists, one an Englishman and one an Indian, came up with this theory of the existence of our universe, how it could come into existence. This was because with better and better telescopes being developed after the First World War, between the two world wars, they discovered something very strange. They discovered that it seemed as if every object in the universe, whether it was just a tiny little rock flying around, or a planet, or a galaxy, that all these objects seemed to be moving away from each other more and more and more. And how could this be explained? That they came up with the phrase, an expanding universe. It's as if the universe is being blown up like a great balloon. And how could that have happened? So the explanation they gave was that the origin of the universe must have been a gigantic explosion, the Big Bang. That's how they refer to the theory. And they couldn't say in their scientific scrupulousness, they said, we can't say anything about what was before the Big Bang. That is beyond the horizon of our knowledge, and probably we will never be able to go beyond that horizon. We can't know what happened before this event. They call it the singularity. They can only trace, according to their theories, their observations, their measurements, what has happened in the material universe since then. And that has become actually the dogma of modern science, that it's not possible to go beyond the origin of our material universe. It's not possible for human knowledge to go beyond that. So this suicidal rash expenditure is Sri Aurobindo's wonderfully colorful way of talking about this huge explosion. Something was there, we have no idea what it was, but it just blew itself up. And its remains are scattered all over the universe, and they're still scattering, they're still spreading further and further away from each other. This is the suicidal rash expenditure. But it's this suicidal rash expenditure that has created our world. Creating the world by a mystery of self-loss, by blowing itself up so that there's no trace of what was before. Our world has been created. That thing, whatever it was, has poured its scattered works on empty space. And the second part of the theory is that this is a huge expansion. But theoretically, they think that if everything has been blown up like that, eventually they will tend to fall back together again. And there is this theory which is about entropy, that everything will have to collapse back into its original form or into another form, because everything is getting progressively more and more disintegrated, chaotic. So then the poet concludes, late shall the self-disintegrating force, after a long time, they have made calculations about how long it will be, late shall that self-disintegrating force contract. It will come together again, contract the immense expansion it has made. And when it does that contraction, that will be the end of our universe, they think. Then ends this mighty and unmeaning toil. We can ask, what is all this immense expenditure of energy about? What was the point of it all? What is the point of it all? The void, the original emptiness, is left bare, vacant as before. So I hope that this brief amateur expose will satisfy the people who have asked about this point.
An inconclusive play is reason's toil. Each strong idea can use her as its tool. Accepting every brief, she pleads her case. Open to every thought, she cannot know. The eternal advocate, seated as judge, armours in logic's invulnerable mail 1,000 combatants for truth's veiled throne, and sets on a high horseback of argument to tilt forever with a wordy lance in a mock tournament where none can win. Assaying thought's values with her rigid tests, balanced she sits on wide and empty air, aloof and pure in her impartial poise. Absolute her judgments seem, but none is sure. Time cancels all her verdicts in appeal. Although, like sunbeams to our glowworm mind, her knowledge feigns to fall from a clear heaven, its rays are a lantern's lustres in the night. She throws a glittering robe on ignorance. But now is lost her ancient sovereign claim to rule mind's high realm in her absolute right, bind thought with logic's forged infallible chain, or see truth nude in a bright abstract haze. A master and slave of stark phenomenon, she travels on the roads of erring sight, or looks upon a set mechanical world constructed for her by her instruments. A bullock yoked in the cart of proven fact, she drags huge knowledge bales through matter's dust to reach utility's immense bazaar. Apprentice she has grown to her old drudge. An aided sense is her seeking's arbiter. This now she uses as the assayer's stone. As if she knew not facts are husks of truth, the husks she keeps, the kernel throws aside. An ancient wisdom fades into the past. The age's faith becomes an idle tale. God passes out of the awakened thought, an old discarded dream needed no more. Only she seeks mechanic nature's keys. Interpreting stone laws inevitable, she digs into matter's hard concealing soil to unearth the processes of all things done. A loaded, huge, self-worked machine appears to her eyes' eager and admiring stare. An intricate and meaningless enginery of ordered, fateful, and unfailing chance. Ingenious and meticulous and minute, its brood unconscious, accurate device unrolls an unerring march, maps a sure road. It plans without thinking, acts without a will, a million purposes serves with purpose none, and builds a rational world without a mind. It has no mover, no maker, no idea. Its vast self-action toils without a cause. A lifeless energy, irresistibly driven, death's head on the body of necessity, engenders life and fathers consciousness, then wonders why all was and whence it came. Our thoughts are parts of the immense machine, our ponderings but a freak of matter's law. The mystic's lore was a fancy or a blind. Of soul or spirit we have now no need. Matter is the admirable reality, the patent, unescapable miracle, the hard truth of things, simple, eternal, soul. A suicidal rash expenditure, creating the world by a mystery of self-loss, has poured its scattered works on empty space. Late shall the self-disintegrating force contract the immense expansion it has made. Then ends this mighty and unmeaning toil. The void is left bare, vacant as before.